Hi, I'm Margie Hofer. I'm the Curator of Decorative Arts here at the New York Historical Society. We're standing in the Luce Center, which houses about 70% of the Historical Society's permanent collections. The Luce Center is what we call an open storage facility. It's actually a trendy mode for displaying collections in museums today because it allows many more objects to be in front before the public instead of in off-site storage or in a dark attic or basement. So when visitors come to the Luce Center, they might see curators studying objects, art handlers moving things around, conservators at work, and it gives you a much better sense of what a museum's operations are about. We have objects of high culture, very fine paintings and sculpture representing elite life in New York. We also have many objects of everyday life, spinning wheels and butter molds and toys, archaeological artifacts, firefighting equipment, police equipment, so it's quite a range. We think of ourselves in some ways as the city's attic. The objects really help bring history to life. A lot of the objects here literally played a role in history. We have about 40,000 objects here in the Luce Center, and now I want to show you just a few of my favorites. This big drum-shaped wheel is a draft wheel from the Civil War era. Earlier in 1863, Abraham Lincoln had passed the National Conscription Act, and on July 13th, they began the draft, and this one is from the 7th District on the Lower East Side. They would put little cards into the drum, and then they would turn the drum and pull out the names of those who would serve. This touched off a major riot, one of the worst disasters in New York City up to 9/11. It ended with over 100 people dead and thousands and thousands involved in this terrible riot. And it took troops coming from Gettysburg to help quell the violence. This draft wheel is actually the only one that survives from that day. It came to the Historical Society in 1865, very shortly after the event. And it came filled with hundreds of cards of those who were eligible for the draft, presumably the lucky ones who were not picked that day. One of the most imposing objects in the Luce Center is the Beekman Coach. The coach was ordered by the merchant James Beekman in 1771 during the Rococo period, and there are elements on it where you can see this foliage, this scroll work, very typical of the 1770s. But coaches had to be up to the minute in terms of style. And it's very clear that around the 1790s, Beekman had his coach updated. So these swags and stars are all very neoclassical, and even this celadon color was all the rage. A coach like this would have been one in a fleet of vehicles that a prominent New Yorker would have had. A coach like this he would have used to go out to balls or dancing assemblies or other extremely formal events. But just riding around town to get to and from places, he would have used a much simpler carriage. This is an extremely rare survival. There are actually, in America, only 3 carriages that survive from the 18th century in their original condition. And one reason is that they were real status symbols, and carriages had to be up to the minute stylish. If your carriage was 5 years out of fashion, you didn't want to be caught dead riding around in it. So these were scrapped when they were out of style, and we're very lucky that the Beekman family maintained this coach in their stables on Long Island until 1911, when they gave it to the New York Historical Society. The New York Historical Society has one of the world's largest collections of Tiffany lamps. We have 132. The lamps have been given a new interpretation recently. Prior to the new research, most people assumed that Louis C. Tiffany himself designed most of these lamps. So it was revolutionary to discover that it was actually a woman, Clara Driscoll, whose name no one really even knew, who was responsible for these really iconic designs, ranging from the wisteria lamp to the dragonfly lamp to most of the nature-themed shades produced by Tiffany Studios. And I think many people even assumed that Tiffany himself was making these lamps. But what we now know is that a big department of women were responsible for making the lamps, specifically for selecting the glass that would be in each shade. And that was really the artistry. And the glass was produced in many different colors and textures and hues. So they were literally painting with the glass these images of nature. And then the lamp was actually assembled by men in the men's department. There was a very gender distinct workplace at Tiffany Studios. One that I think will particularly delight children is this wonderful Noah's Ark from the second half of the 19th century. This is kind of a Cadillac version of a Noah's Ark. This particular model, with hundreds of pairs of animals, would have been played with by a rather wealthy and lucky child. But there were smaller versions with fewer animals that were played with by middle-class children or even families out in the American West. Noah's Arks were particularly popular with children because they could be played with on Sundays. In many families, the Sabbath was strictly observed and play was forbidden on Sundays except with properly approved toys. And a Noah's Ark, with its biblical references, was an approved toy for Sunday play. There's something for everyone in the Luce Center, whether you're a history buff, an art collector, or a family looking for an interesting activity. There are wonderful objects to delight any visitor, and I hope you all come and visit.